Hello, how are you? Did you happen to know that one of the absolute best times to burn off more of that stubborn abdominal fat or belly fat can actually be late at night even while you are fast asleep? At that time, we enter a completely different hormonal state in which our insulin levels can drop. If you do the right things, your cortisol pattern changes, your growth hormone rises physiologically, and it can be a very favorable moment precisely to burn more of that fat. But like I told you, only if you do everything right during the day and especially in that time before you go to sleep. I'm going to give you 7 very important tips that will help you with this. I'm sure you're going to love the video. Stick around until the end. You won't want to miss it. Before we start, I want to ask you if you would like to lose belly fat, if that's the area of your body where fat accumulation bothers you the most or not. Some people feel like their belly is bigger, even though they're relatively at a healthy weight. Does that happen to you? Or do you think you've actually gained weight all over your body? I'd love to see your comment and tell me, is your belly that higher up stomach or is it that lower pouch-like belly? Write that for me so I can bring more videos to help you. So the first step is for us to think about keeping our insulin under control. We know that insulin is a hormone, an anabolic hormone, meaning it stores and accumulates energy in our body. The more glucose we have circulating, the more insulin we are going to secrete. And if you've just done some physical exercise at that moment, the glucose will be used by your muscles. I'll talk more about that later. Now, if you consume a lot of carbohydrates, especially high glycemic index carbs, and in large amounts, you will have a greater secretion of insulin. And what does this insulin do? It causes this glucose to be stored in the adipose fat cells. And we already know statistically that the preferred cells are those in the central visceral abdominal region. So you will have a greater tendency to accumulate fat. If your insulin is high all day long, the tendency is that you will always be in an anabolic mode, meaning storing energy, storing calories, storing fat, rather than in a catabolic mode. And we know that GH, which is secreted at night, is a catabolic hormone, the catabolic GH. In this sense, even though it can increase muscle tissue, the muscle growth tissue, it reduces the amount of fat in our body. So if you have a high secretion of insulin there, they will compete. They are counter-regulatory. So the ideal is for you to keep your insulin regulated throughout the day. I have many videos here on the channel talking more about how to control insulin, about glycemic index, because all of this is very related. I'll leave those videos here, but I can already tell you that to keep your insulin under control, the ideal is to avoid consuming, obviously, sugar, sweets, bakery products, things that quickly turn into glucose. White bread, white pasta, white rice, all of these, even though they're not necessarily the sugar you consume, turn into glucose very quickly, and when they're absorbed by your intestine, they're absorbed as glucose. So your body won't know whether it came from white bread or from a spoonful of sugar you put in your coffee. This is a very important detail. It's not about cutting out carbohydrates, but rather making good choices. So lentils, chickpeas, peas, carbohydrates from legumes, vegetables, fruits, greens, seeds. These are much better options for keeping your insulin more controlled. The second thing is to try to keep your low-grade chronic inflammation under control throughout the day. Inflammation is one of the biggest blockers of abdominal fat burning that we have. So, creating a less inflammatory environment makes perfect sense when we think about reducing abdominal fat. We know that regarding inflammation, what has already been scientifically proven is that when the body is more inflamed, the mitochondria become less effective. So if you want to have a better energy powerhouse, which is what the mitochondria are, turning calories and fat into energy, you need to have a less inflammatory environment. We also know that a more inflamed body tends to decrease basal metabolic expenditure, which will worsen the issue of fat accumulation here in this region, central visceral abdominal. So when we manage to reduce inflammation, everything becomes more efficient. And at night, we enter more of a cellular repair mode, which works very well when you don't have an inflammatory environment. What makes your body's inflammation worse? First thing, sugar, once again. Because it increases insulin production, this creates a more inflammatory environment. But by then, you'll already have made that change because of what I explained to you earlier about insulin. Other things that are pro-inflammatory are bad fats. So, foods that are fried, trans fats, saturated fats, a lot of omega-6, in proportion to omega-3, which is the good fat, when increased, can leave your body in a more inflammatory state. Another thing that increases inflammation in our body is the excessive consumption of ultra-processed foods. We know that many times these foods are a bomb of all of that, right? Often they have a lot of sugar, bad fats, colorants, stabilizers, flavorings, many compounds that our intestines can't even properly identify as food. So they can also increase our inflammation. So controlling these products will help you reduce this chronic inflammation. Another very important step is to think about your last meal, right before going to bed. and to take extra care with it. Of course, we need to take care of our diet throughout the whole day. But if you've been eating a balanced diet all day and then right before bed you have a beer, some peanuts, or you just can't resist and end up eating something sweet at that moment, if that's when you slip up, that's the worst thing for belly fat, for abdominal fat. Because like I told you, if at that moment you secrete a lot of insulin, you increase your blood sugar and sodium levels a lot, even retaining more fluid. If you consume more inflammatory foods, that's the moment when you'll signal hormonally and even metabolically for fat accumulation at the expense of the secretion of those good hormones. So ideally, this meal before bed should be as light as possible. Maybe a soup, a salad, or maybe some meat with a salad. The salad doesn't have to be carb-free. Like I said, you can add some chickpeas, lentils, or soy protein. It could even be beans with grilled chicken and a salad. It doesn't have to be just something light, so to speak. It can be a proper meal, but balanced and with an eye on controlling the amount of carbohydrates, especially before bed, to get good results in that regard. Be careful not to eat too lightly throughout the day and then get to the evening completely starving and end up ruining everything. That's because when you reach that point, your body is very hungry and craving a lot of food. And then it becomes much harder for you to control yourself. Remember that if you maintain a good intake of protein, fiber, and healthy fats throughout the day, you'll be able to keep your insulin levels low, feel satiated, and avoid those spikes and drops in blood sugar and insulin. So you'll be able to keep your hunger more under control and avoid eating so much at the end of the day. Another thing that's super important is to increase your calorie expenditure in ways that don't depend on physical exercise. More and more, science is talking about this, reminding us to also pay attention to our daily calorie expenditure from our everyday activities. Why am I telling you this? Because there are people who say, I do 30 minutes on the treadmill every day, and then do nothing else. They spend the whole day sitting, either working, watching TV, or on their phones. They're highly sedentary, despite those 20 or 30 minutes of exercise. It's better than nothing, but studies have already shown that when we manage to increase this energy expenditure with activities that aren't formal exercise, it makes a big difference in our basal metabolism, insulin resistance, and the use of fat as fuel throughout our day. So this will make you burn more calories without even noticing. And on top of that, it's good for our cardiovascular health and our metabolism as a whole. So ideally, you should try to be more active throughout the day. What does that mean? Instead of taking the elevator, try going up and down the stairs. Instead of coming home from work and just sitting there, do things around your house, put on a dance class from YouTube if you want, if you like it, go for a walk, leave the house, park farther away from work or from school, college, a course, or even from a friend's or relative's house you're visiting. Park a little farther away so you have to walk there and back. Try to add more movement to your day. Instead of asking the grocery store to deliver to your house, go to the store yourself. Things like that, where you can do more activities that aren't exactly exercise, will also help you with abdominal fat. This has already been scientifically proven. Another important thing to remember is the role of sleep in the accumulation of central visceral abdominal fat, right? Sleeping properly can be a great ally in managing this fat. It can even boost fat burning, including during the night. Because sleeping isn't just about switching off, right? Our body needs to enter the right stage of deep, restorative, and continuous sleep in order to secrete several important hormones. So, when we sleep properly and deeply for the necessary amount of time, which we know is at least 7 or 8 hours of sleep per night, we are able to secrete growth hormone and experience the expected physiological drop in nighttime cortisol. This also leads to greater mobilization of visceral fat during this period. So, GH is a strongly lipolytic hormone, as I mentioned to you, and it acts directly on abdominal fat. That's why people who say, oh, I can't sleep very well, are usually those who tend to have more abdominal fat. In addition, we know that people who sleep poorly tend to make worse food choices throughout the day. They don't have as much control over what they eat because they're already very tired, and their brains can't fight off food temptations as well. These are also people who exercise less because they're tired. Who wants to go to the gym or work out at home when they're tired? No one. This affects hormones, food choices the next day, and also physical exercise. Another important point is water consumption, which of course should be encouraged throughout the day. We also know that water is extremely important for lipolysis, for fat burning, and for metabolism as a whole. Just be careful not to drink too much water before going to bed, because usually people who drink a lot of water before sleeping wake up in the middle of the night to urinate. And that actually disrupts your sleep. It makes your sleep less deep, less restorative, and harms you in that way. Before we continue, I want to ask you to like the video. If you're enjoying it, if you trust my content, go ahead and hit that like button. And if you know someone who would appreciate this information I'm sharing, let's share it and spread this chain of kindness. Another really important thing is to actually try to stimulate your metabolism throughout the day. I told you that you can do this through exercise, physical activity, in fact, not just exercise, but caloric expenditure through daily activities. But obviously, when physical exercise is done properly, it will have an effect both at that moment and afterwards. Exercises that consume a lot of oxygen have a well-established, scientifically proven EPOC effect, which is post-exercise oxygen consumption. And the exercise most closely related to this is HIIT, which stands for high intensity interval training. And there are several workouts on YouTube for beginners and for more advanced people. Before starting any kind of physical exercise, remember to talk to your doctor in your city to make sure you're cleared for it, everything's in order, and if you have any questions, talk to your physical education professional as well. But I just want to tell you that there are many workouts here on YouTube created by physical education professionals that you can do and that can help you in this regard. You can type HIIT, H-I-I-T, beginner workout, advanced workout according to your own physical ability. HIIT is very interesting because it really stimulates your metabolism. It stays elevated not just at that moment, but for hours and hours afterward. It consumes a lot of oxygen and cellular respiration remains increased for a long time. So it uses a lot of energy to repair the muscles between one workout and the next. Usually this effect of HIIT can last from 12 to 48 hours after the workout, keeping your metabolism more active and precisely helping to burn more of that abdominal fat, even if you are at rest afterward. If you don't know what HIIT is, as I mentioned, it's high-intensity interval training. Usually it's done with a very intense burst of exercise. For example, jumping jacks, squats, push-ups, exercises like that. So you do it for a set period of time, let's say 30 seconds, as hard as you can, and then, for example, you spend 1 minute walking in place, waiting for your heart rate to go down, and then you push it up again, lower it, and push it up. The length of these intervals will always depend on the professional and the person's own physical capacity. Another super important final tip is to try to increase your muscle mass. This is different from HIIT exercise because it's when you do strength training with a direct focus. We know that muscle has a big effect on our metabolism. It's the most metabolically active tissue we have. And stimulating more muscle growth will help you burn more ATP, maintaining some kind of muscle repair because when we do strength training, we break down muscle tissue. And to do this repair, we need energy, calories to rebuild the muscle. And every time this reconstruction happens, the muscle grows a little, causing hypertrophy, which increases the amount of muscle tissue and in turn raises your basal metabolism. So gaining muscle is important. No one here is saying that you need to get super buff or extremely muscular, but rather to maintain or increase your muscle tissue. Especially if you're already over 50, you already know from my other videos that sarcopenia is knocking at the door, that loss of muscle mass that happens physiologically to many people over time, and we always want to prevent that. So, to prevent it, the ideal is to do weight training, water aerobics, Pilates, exercises that really focus on building muscle mass to make sure you keep your metabolism active, and that also helps you burn more fat during the night. I want to remind you that if you are overweight, besides having a bigger belly, what will definitely help you lose weight is a calorie deficit. So, consuming fewer calories than you burn will help you to lose weight and consequently also to reduce your belly. Controlling the amount of high glycemic index carbohydrates, as I mentioned before, can also be an excellent strategy to help you specifically in this regard. And we can't expect that by making these changes I mentioned for just one day, you'll wake up the next morning without a belly, right? We need to have realistic expectations in this regard because it's a process, right? The amount of time you spent accumulating fat around your belly, that's about the same amount of time it will take you to burn it off. And also remember, if you have any questions or need specific guidance, whether you have a health condition or not, to talk to the nutritionist or doctor who follows you in your city, okay? This video is purely informational to help you. I want to know which of these steps you're going to start putting into practice even today. I'd love to see your comment. And also, don't forget to leave your like. That helps me a lot. It's really important to me. And share it with someone who would enjoy it. Let's grow this chain of kindness. That's what I want here. See you next time. Bye.